Hey everyone, this is Matt from howtogardendesign.com, back for step 3 in my Landscape Design Basics 6-step beginner guide. We're going to look at addressing problems and learning to find opportunities. Basically, what I call it in my written version of this guide is a skeleton plan, and we'll get into more about what that is, how useful it is, and how you can use it to help, I think, make your design function a little better. So, what is it? It's basically a bare bones outline of different spaces in the area you are looking to design. So it's kind of similar to site analysis that we looked at in step 2, but it's a little more subjective or personal or even esoteric. And I touched on one of those points in step 2, and we'll look at that in more detail in this video as well. So realistically, we want to outline problems that you uncovered during your site analysis, but we also want to note potential opportunities you could take advantage of as well in your design. So we'll look more at what that means. So here are some examples. This is one of the designs. Again, this is for a wheelchair-friendly garden design, so a user in a wheelchair who wants to be able to move around their property really easily. Now, really simple outline of problems and opportunities. Let's look at the opportunities. Actually, no, let's look at the problems first. So the problems are in red. So one thing I noted in my site analysis is that we have neighboring oversight kind of in this area here, and that's approximately the area they can look out into. There's also, evening shade. Again, I noted here it's a really minor issue. Maybe you wouldn't want to put an entertaining area there, for example. This is how simple site analysis can be. There's a slope here that will probably require some working around, basically, and that's obviously important because if the user's in a wheelchair, we're limited in what we can put in to address this kind of problem. And the lowest area that might need cut and fill, but a minor issue, again, so the lowest area is here, just something to think about. That's where water is most likely to pool and collect, so whatever materials we use, we want to make sure they can handle that, or, as you'll see, maybe there's other ways we can deal with that from a wheelchair user's perspective. So again, for cut and fill, for those who don't know, cut is basically any soil that you need to remove from an area, and fill is any soil that you need to put into an area, either to make it level, or perhaps you're doing some other sort of design. Basically, it's taking soil away or adding soil to this area to raise or lower the level, depending on what you need to do. The green is opportunities, and I'd encourage you to use a similar kind of idea and layout in terms of how you want to write down your own opportunities. But one thing I mentioned here is actually good light to the house. So you might actually need some shade here in some way because this is south facing. We're in the northern hemisphere. In theory, this is a made up site, so don't worry about it. But realistically, we get quite a nice lot of sun that kind of hits the building in this area. The other good thing I've noted here is spaces are relatively flat and shaped. What do I mean by shaped? One thing I talk about in any design thing that I look at is letting your surroundings help influence and dictate how spaces are shaped. And this is a really good example of that. So surroundings can include architecture. And in this case, the architecture kind of nicely lends itself to say, well, if you just continue lines out into the garden, some people think of these as regulatory lines or regulating lines. Basically, if you continue a line, imaginary line, out into the garden from all these different walls, they kind of help you nicely shape spaces. So you can see there's one kind of rectangle area here, and there's another one here as well. And these are useful ways to help limit sizes of things, but also when you actually create a space that is like this, it kind of nicely fits within the architecture and the outline of the building. Again, there's another nice flat-ish space in this area that we could look to take advantage of as well. So that's really what I mean when it comes to problems and opportunities. We're just making little comments and annotations to say, well, this is something that I might want to address, this is a potential problem, or this is a potential opportunity that we can use in our design process. And here's something I mentioned. Activities are things you want to do in a space. So potentially, particularly for someone in a wheelchair, we might need some fairly specific activities that they can enjoy and utilize. So these green areas are looking like better opportunities for where we can place activities. So this is a good example here where we could place an activity here. But if it's a space that the user wants to spend a lot of time in, we also need to consider neighbor oversight. Is that something they're concerned about? Is that going to be a problem? We need to find a way to address that as well. Features are something you want to see in a space. So that's just another little note that I make, where an activity for me is, as I said, a space you want to be in to utilize, whereas a feature is generally something you want to look at and see. You don't interact with it in the same way. Here's another design where I'm looking at a really hot climate. Now I think this is more or less similar to what I had in the previous version, where I was adding notes onto kind of opportunities. So again, the cool side of the house, maybe that's where you want to add plants that you wouldn't necessarily have on the southern side because that's where it's too hot. Same thing here in this little corner there where it gets protected from afternoon sun. This is similar to the one that we looked at earlier. Don't know why I added it, but basically another point here is we've got a lowest point where water will sheet away to these areas here, in particular in this corner. Again, this is most exposed to wind. So this is kind of a combination site analysis and I guess opportunities, bits and pieces. Third one, I think we've looked at this as well. Again, I made a note here of screening to block neighbours' view, along this area here. Problems. So I guess that's a problem, realistically. So one of the problems here is that you've got kind of a neighbouring property and they can look into this area depending on what we're going to do in this area, depending on what activities and features you want to include. You may want to think about providing some sort of screening in this area. Similarly, we've got a lot of utility options here. So what can we do to potentially surround them, or at least hide them from view, without kind of impinging on access, because you need to access them should you require maintenance. But also you don't want to be too close, because the closer you get to these things, sometimes that might mess with the airflow around them, so that might actually impact how they function. So you want to be careful there. Another thing I've noted here, it's not really an opportunity or a problem, it's just a note really, is because these windows are full level, they go full height I should say, you don't want to put, or you probably don't want to put things that are too tall in front of them if you want to allow more light in. So I've made a note saying keep plantings low in front of windows. Again, I made the note of the utilities, that we want to block them but still maintain access. Still keep access through the middle area. As much as I would like to clean this area up and make it look pretty, it's still something where you need to be able to push a wheelbarrow through full of mulch, for example, that kind of thing. So I mentioned before about the idea of like something that's esoteric, and this is what I was really thinking of, which is the wall glows during summer afternoons. I want to try and keep view of that if possible. So this is one of those opportunities that a designer, if you brought in a designer, they would never know this existed. But I only know it because this was my bedroom here. And in late afternoons in summer, this time of year for me, I used to sit in here with our little Venetian blinds that were just kind of slats. And the sun would come from this direction, hit this wall, and make it glow this incredible, because these were probably red bricks really, earthy colours. It would glow with this incredible light, and that would flow into this room, and it was golden. It was amazing, and it's something I've always remembered. And so if I was designing a space like this, I wouldn't want to necessarily compromise that view. And that's challenging, because you can see I've made a note that you want to screen the neighbours from view, but at the same time I want to keep view here, right? So maybe I can't do both, or maybe I have to think of other ways that I can allow both to occur. Maintaining some privacy, but also getting that view in. The reason I want to bring this point up is because if I was designing the full property, for example, I would probably look for opportunities to bring in brickwork, be it as like a low wall or a bench or whatever it may be, and I would want to position it on the western, or in this case the eastern side of the yard, so it would catch that late afternoon sun. Because to me that's beautiful, like having those little opportunities to be able to capture that afternoon light would, I think, really add another dimension to the garden. And again, that's only something that I would think of because I've lived there, right? So this is the opportunities that I think living at the house and living in the space, however long you have lived there, if it's a new house, you need to probably spend some more time there. But if you've lived at your place for a long time and only now are looking to design your own garden, these kind of little opportunities, think about where you like to sit and spend time or look out to, because these are little opportunities that bringing someone in to do a quick walk around and give you some ideas, they just can't capture that. So that's where I think this kind of little skeleton plan, so to speak, can be really useful, because it allows you to think about these different opportunities that are sometimes temporal. This only lasted for potentially a month during the year, and the rest of the time it didn't quite have the same effect. Other times it's just personal, right? Like no designer would look at this and go, oh yeah, that's something I want to incorporate into my design. But if I was doing it, I would, because it's personal to me and I really enjoy it. So look, this is it. Realistically, write down, after you've done your site analysis, this step is all about making notes on some of the problems you want to address. So you probably uncovered those during site analysis. And also some of the little things you want to take potential opportunities or advantage of. Even just some other general notes like I've got here, which is like, all right, well, we probably want to keep things low in front of a window. this kind of stuff is really helpful because I think it can clarify. In some ways, you're outlining constraints, right? So you're going, all right, cool, this is something I want to address. So therefore, what can I use to address that? And that's when you start getting into that exploration that we'll look at next, which is ideas, techniques, ways to address specific problems that you can then incorporate back into your design. So that's it for this video. Join me for the next one where, as I said, we're going to look at, I guess, taking ideas, so in particular images, and how we can pull things out of those and incorporate them into a design like this. So I'll see you then.